In the heart of a rustic village, where the tales of old seemed to whisper through the breeze, I, Liam, lived a life shadowed by a quiet turmoil. This village, cloaked in the charm of yesteryear, was home not only to myself, but to my younger brother Finn and his fiancée, Alara. Finn, with his easy smile and open heart, was the sort of man whom everyone admired. I often found myself standing beside him, cloaked in his shadow, as villagers praised his virtues. Alara was a vision, her beauty matched only by her sharp mind. She moved with a grace that seemed to draw the sunlight to her, and her laughter was a melody that brightened our quaint streets. They were a match celebrated by all, Finn with his gentle strength, and Alara with her radiant charm. Our home was a modest one, nestled between the sprawling fields and the dense forest that bordered our village. The forest was a vault of endless folklore, with stories of spirits and ancient magic whispered among the trees. It was said that the luck of the village was spun like a web from the heart of that forest, intertwining our fates with the mysterious forces dwelling within its shadows. As for me, I lived with a secret that weighed heavily on my soul. My feelings for Alara were a silent storm raging within me, hidden beneath layers of brotherly affection and feigned indifference. Each day, as I watched their love blossom, a part of me withered quietly in the shadows of forbidden desire. In the solitude of the forest, I often sought solace, wandering under its ancient boughs, hoping to lose my sorrow among the trees. It was there, amidst the whispers of the past, that my story took an unexpected turn, leading me down a path woven with deception and haunted by the echoes of the old village tales. It was in this setting, steeped in folklore and bound by ties of love and loyalty, that my tale of love, betrayal, and inner conflict began to unfold, forever altering the course of our lives. Under the cloak of nightfall, with the stars barely piercing through the dense canopy of the village forest, my troubled heart led me deeper into the woods than I had ever ventured before. The whispers of the trees seemed to echo my own inner turmoil as I grappled silently with my forbidden love for Alara. That night, the air was thick with the scent of moss and ancient secrets. My mind was a tumult of despair and longing, a silent plea to the universe for some resolution to my agony. It was then, at the height of my desperation, that I encountered her, the old woman known in hushed tones among the villagers as the Keeper of Fates. Her eyes, like pools of shadow, seemed to see right through to the darkest corners of my soul. "Lost are you, Liam?" Her voice was a rustling of leaves, soft yet unnervingly clear. The heart wants what it dares not claim. I stood frozen, my voice a prisoner in my throat. How did she know my name? How did she unveil my secret longing with but a few words? Yet in my heart, I knew the forest had its way of revealing one's true nature. With a crooked smile, the old woman drew closer. "I can weave a path for you to Alara's heart," she whispered, her breath carrying the chill of the night. "But every choice has its price, young Liam. What do you ask of me?" My voice barely rose above a whisper, fear mingling with a surge of hope that perhaps, just perhaps, I could alter my fate. "Deceive your brother," she said, her words dropping like stones into the stillness of my soul. "Lead him astray just once, and Alara's heart will turn towards you, as surely as the river flows to the sea." The proposition struck like a viper's bite. To deceive Finn, the brother who had stood by me through every storm, was a betrayal beyond measure. Yet the image of Alara, her smile lighting up her face as she looked at me with love, was a temptation that stirred the deepest shadows of my heart. Torn between love and duty, I wrestled with the choice under the watchful eyes of the old woman. The forest around us seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my decision. With a heavy heart, a part of me breaking with each word, I whispered, "What must I do?" As the old woman laid out her plan, each word etched a deeper mark on my conscience. It was simple yet profoundly deceitful. A lie that would lead Finn away from the village on a fool's errand, leaving Alara alone and vulnerable to new affections. The weight of my decision settled coldly on my shoulders, a burden I chose under the bewitching promise of love. As I left the forest that night, the path behind me seemed to vanish, as though the trees themselves conspired to keep my choice a secret. The die was cast, and my soul, entwined with the dark whispers of the woods, embarked on a journey from which there could be no return. The fate of our lives, spun by a deceitful thread, would unravel in ways I could scarcely imagine. As the days unfolded after my fateful decision in the forest, a palpable shift hung over the village, a prelude to the looming chaos I had unwittingly invited. Each morning as I awoke, the weight of my deceit pressed heavily upon my chest, a constant reminder of the path I had chosen. My interactions with Finn, once filled with the easy camaraderie of brotherhood, now felt strained, each word between us tainted by the secrets I harbored. Finn, oblivious to the dark undercurrents, focused on his upcoming nuptials with Alara. However, luck, as though swayed by the mysterious old woman's influence, began to turn against him. Our family's fields, usually lush and bountiful, withered inexplicably, the crops failing despite the favorable weather. Finn's confusion and distress grew with each passing day, his furrowed brows reflecting the turmoil that plagued him. Simultaneously, mysterious accidents befell him. A carriage wheel would come loose as he rode into town, or a well-timed slip near the river almost led him into the icy waters. Each incident, minor yet alarming, seemed orchestrated by an unseen hand, manipulating the threads of fate with cruel precision. Amidst these calamities, my deceit deepened. I found myself weaving intricate lies, each one designed to isolate Finn, to turn the villagers' empathy towards his misfortune into whispers of cursed luck. With a heavy heart, I watched as Alara's worry for Finn morphed into a restless anxiety, her once bright eyes now clouded with concern. My own internal battle raged fiercer with each day. The guilt of betraying Finn gnawed at my conscience, yet the longing for Alara's affection drove me to continue my charade. I would catch myself, in moments of solitude, wrestling with the magnitude of my actions, the moral boundaries I had crossed. The image of the old woman in the forest haunted me, her cryptic smile a reminder of the price yet to be fully paid. As the deceit grew, so too did its complexity. I found myself entangled in the web I had spun, each lie calling for another, a desperate attempt to maintain the illusion I had created. My relationship with Alara changed subtly during this period. She began to lean on me for support as Finn's fortunes dwindled. Our conversations, once filled with light-hearted banter, now carried an undercurrent of something deeper, something perilously close to the connection I had yearned for. This escalating chain of deception and misfortune culminated one evening when Finn, distressed over a particularly bad omen in the village, a crow landing on his windowsill at dusk, came to me. His usual resilience seemed to crumble as he confided his fears. "Liam, do you ever feel as if the world is against you?" he asked, his voice a mixture of despair and desperation. Standing there, facing the brother I loved and betrayed, I felt the full weight of my choices. My response was a whisper, barely audible, a lie cloaked in an assurance that was as hollow as the life I was now leading. "No, Finn, it's just a rough patch. It will pass." But even as I spoke, I knew the truth. The rough patch was a storm I had conjured, and it was far from over. The day of Finn and Alara's wedding dawned with a deceptive serenity, the early sunlight filtering through the village as if blessing the union to come. I stood beside Finn, ostensibly as his best man, but inside I was a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Each beat of my heart was heavy with the dread of impending doom, each tick a reminder of the web of deceit I had spun around us all. As the ceremony approached, the village square filled with well-wishers, the air alive with the fragrance of wildflowers and the sound of lilting music. Alara, radiant in her wedding dress, was the epitome of grace and beauty. Seeing her in that moment, the realization of what I had sacrificed for my selfish desires struck me with brutal force. The joy of the occasion was marred for me by the shadow of the deceit lurking just beneath the surface. Then, just as the vows were about to be exchanged, disaster struck. A messenger, breathless and disheveled, burst through the crowd with news that our family barn had caught fire. Finn, ever the dedicated brother and son, reacted instantly, rushing off to save what he could, his wedding forgotten in the face of crisis. I followed him, driven by a surge of guilt and a desperate need to protect him from the consequences of my own actions. As we approached the barn, the flames were already licking high into the sky, smoke billowing into the clear blue of the wedding day. Finn, heedless of his own safety, plunged into the inferno. In that moment, time seemed to slow. I reached out to grab him, to pull him back from the fiery maw, but as I did, my foot caught on a loose stone. The fall was swift, the world tilting dangerously. In my panicked scramble, my hand found Finn's arm, pulling him down with me. The impact was harsh, a painful jolt through my body, but it was Finn who bore the brunt of it. He hit his head on a rock, the sound a sickening thud that echoed through the chaotic noise of the fire. As I staggered to my feet, the reality of what had happened crashed into me like a physical blow. Finn lay unmoving, his face ashen, his wedding attire smeared with dirt and blood. Around us, the fire raged on, a monstrous beacon attracting the villagers. Alara arrived, her wedding dress now tainted with the ashes of what should have been her happiest day. Her scream, upon seeing Finn, was a sound of pure agony that cut through the roar of the flames and the clamor of the crowd. Her eyes met mine, wide with horror and accusation, as the truth of my betrayal, the deceit, the lies, the cursed luck, finally came to light under the most tragic of circumstances. The scene was chaotic, a blur of motion and emotion as attempts were made to revive Finn and contain the fire. I stood frozen, the epicenter of the calamity, my betrayal laid bare for all to see. The weight of my choices, the enormity of the catastrophe I had caused, settled on my shoulders with crushing force. In seeking Alara's love, I had risked everything and lost more than I could have imagined. As Finn was carried away, his condition uncertain, the old woman's words echoed in my ears, a grim reminder of the price of meddling with fate. The day that was meant to celebrate love and union had turned into a tableau of despair, shaped irrevocably by my own hand. The aftermath of the tragedy that unfolded on what should have been a joyous wedding day left the village shrouded in a palpable gloom. Finn lay in a critical state, the balance of his life hanging by a thread, while Alara, consumed by grief and betrayal, faced the unbearable reality of the day's revelations. In the days following the accident, as Finn fought for his life, Alara and I found ourselves in a somber confrontation. The air between us was charged with a heavy silence before she finally spoke, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and sorrow. "How could you, Liam? How could you betray your own brother, and for what? For a selfish desire masked as love." Her words pierced me deeper than any knife could. The truth about my dealings with the mysterious old woman in the forest had come to light, unraveling the fabric of trust and affection that had once bound us. Alara's face, once a source of comfort and longing, now wore an expression of sheer disappointment and disgust. "I believed in you, Liam. I trusted you as a friend, as family. But you were willing to risk everything, even Finn's life, just to what? To have me?" Her voice broke, and the pain in her eyes was a mirror to the devastation in my heart. There was nothing I could say to mend the chasm of betrayal that yawned between us. With a heart heavy with regret, I watched as Alara turned away from me, her decision clear. She would never forgive me, and I knew then that the Alara I loved was lost to me forever, not by fate, but by my own doing. Tormented by guilt and desperate for some semblance of redemption, I sought out the old woman in the forest. The journey was a blur, each step driven by a frantic need to confront the architect of my downfall. I found her at the same spot where we had first met, her presence as enigmatic as the shadows that danced between the trees. "Why?" I demanded, my voice raw with emotion. "Why offer me such a choice if only to lead to this destruction?" The old woman's eyes, dark and unfathomable, met mine with an unsettling calm. "The luck I offered was never meant to be a gift, Liam, but a test of character, which you failed. It was not the luck that led to destruction. It was your choices, fueled by selfish desires and a heart unready to weigh the cost of its wishes." Her words were a cold splash of clarity. I had been a pawn in a cruel game of moral testing, and I had moved myself into checkmate. The realization that the catastrophe was of my own making was a bitter pill to swallow. The old woman, with her cryptic knowledge of human nature, had merely held up a mirror to my soul, and I had recoiled from my own reflection. As I left the forest, the weight of my failures heavy on my shoulders, the wind seemed to carry whispers of judgment. The village, once a place of comfort and belonging, now felt like a prison built from my regrets. I was left to grapple with the harsh truth that the destruction of my relationships, the possible loss of my brother, and the shattering of an innocent heart were consequences of my own flawed character, not of twisted luck or fate. As the seasons changed, so too did the village begin to mend from the wounds of the past. Finn, by some miracle, slowly recovered, his resilience a testament to the village's enduring spirit. Yet the scars of what had transpired were indelible, not just on Finn's body but in the heart of every villager. The story of the wedding day tragedy, intertwined with tales of deceit and accursed luck, wove itself into the fabric of our village folklore. It served as a somber reminder of the fragile nature of trust and the heavy price of betrayal. I, once a brother and friend, now found myself an outcast within my own home. My days were spent in isolation, the companionship I once took for granted replaced by the silent company of my own remorse. The smiles that greeted me were now tinged with wariness, and the bonds I had broken seemed irreparable. The weight of my guilt was a constant companion, reminding me of the chaos I had caused with my own hands. Alara, her spirit as much a casualty of my actions as any, could no longer bear the weight of her memories in the village. Before she left, I saw her one last time. It was a quiet morning, the mist still clinging to the dewy grass, as she stood by the edge of the village, ready to step out into a world beyond her pain. Her eyes, once bright with the promise of shared futures, now held a depth of sorrow and resilience. "Goodbye, Liam," she said softly, her voice steady but her eyes avoiding mine. "I hope one day you find the peace you need to forgive yourself." Her departure marked the end of an era for the village and for myself. As she walked away, a figure receding into the distance, it felt as though she took with her the last of my hopes for redemption. Left behind were only the pieces of a fractured life and a community slowly knitting itself back together. In the solitude of my continued exile, I reflected on the lessons painfully learned. The village, resilient and enduring, would survive and grow from the stories of the past, each tale a stitch in the broader tapestry of community lore. And I, forever changed by the events I had set into motion, was left to grapple with a future defined by the search for forgiveness, from my brother, from Alara, but most arduously, from myself. As I wandered the paths of the village, the places where Alara's laughter once filled the air, where Finn and I shared countless dreams, I understood that some stories don't end with reconciliation or triumphant redemption. Some stories end with the quiet, daily struggle to live with one's choices and to hopefully learn from them, so that the tales we leave behind may guide others long after we are gone. As the years passed, the tale of the brothers and the lost bride became a poignant chapter in the village's history, often recounted under the wide canopy of the old trees to listeners young and old. The narrative served not just as a tale of woe and loss, but as a deep moral reflection on the perils that lurk when desires run unchecked and the unpredictable twists of fate. In this story, I, Liam, the protagonist of my own tragic tale, became a figure of quiet reflection, my life a living testament to the consequences of my actions. The villagers, particularly the younger generation, would sometimes find me by the riverbank, staring out over the water, lost in thought. They would hesitantly approach, their curiosity piqued by the infamy of my story, seeking the wisdom earned from my misfortunes. To covet what is not yours to take, to deceive those who trust you most, leads only to a path of loneliness and regret, I would tell them, my voice tinged with the sadness of lived experience. The fabric of fate weaves patterns we cannot foresee. What may seem like a blessing can quickly turn into a curse if driven by selfish intent. The tale also highlighted the dual nature of luck and fate. I spoke of how initially, what seemed like fortuitous events leading me towards my heart's desires were, in fact, the early stitches of a tapestry woven with dark threads of impending sorrow. The old woman in the forest, a figure both feared and revered, had become a symbol in our village folklore of fate's dual promise. It could elevate or devastate with equal indifference. As the seasons turned, the lesson of my story was absorbed into the lifeblood of the village. Parents whispered it to their children during story time, a bedtime story imbued with caution, and elders discussed it over fires in the cold of winter, a reminder of the values that must guide us. The moral, that integrity and respect for the bonds of love and kinship should guide one's actions, became a cornerstone of our community's ethos. Thus, the conclusion of my story, and the legacy it left behind, was not one of simple resolution, but a complex tapestry of human frailty, the power of redemption, and the everlasting impact of our choices. It served as a perpetual reminder that while we cannot control every twist of fate, we can choose the manner in which we face its challenges, and in doing so, perhaps find a measure of peace, in acceptance, and the courage to amend the wrongs of our past. In this way, my story, marked by pain and loss, transformed into a cautionary tale for others to glean wisdom from, ensuring that even in despair, there is a chance for learning and growth. A silver lining that perhaps, in the grand weaving of life, offers a chance for redemption, not just for the storyteller, but for all who heed its lessons.